Today we're going to swashbuckle our way through a mystical land that time forgot. Our heroes are scammers, swindlers and adventurers about to embark on a spree into Kafiristan. That's right, today we're looking at the life, campaigns and most importantly the medals of Daniel Dravot and Peachy Carnehan from The Man Who Would Be King. So this is a fun video where we're going to look and speculate at what medals may have been awarded to those two rogues. We're going to take some clues from the movie which might give us some insight into the units they belonged to and also where they served. Set during the late Victorian era in British India, both Peachy and Daniel are ex-British Army sergeants who, at the end of their 21-year engagement, decide to stay on in India and indulge in a career of pickpocketing, extortion and smuggling, until they come up with the crackpot scheme to conquer a mystical land to the north of Afghanistan, known as Kafiristan. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, but suffice to say, after a series of adventures they reach Kafiristan. Whilst in country, Daniel falls in love with a local woman known as Roxanne. Not that one. And then things start to unravel. With a fictitious ribbon bar that I've put together, I'm going to give our duo 2 campaign medals, a unique star and a long service good conduct medal. During the train carriage scene with Rudyard Kipling, played by Christopher Plummer, Peachy states that he was in the Queen's Own Royal Light Infantry. This was a fictitious regiment invented by Kipling for comic effect. However, the next clues to their army careers we have are that as the two men travelled in disguise across the Khyber Pass, they said the last time that they were there was when they fought their way through the pass, yard by yard, with bobs. Additionally, Daniel also spoke about taking on masses of Afghans swarming down from the hills and having to take command when all the officers had copped it or been killed. As the time frame for the movie and the book is set between 1885 and 1888, they must be talking about the Second Anglo-Afghan War, which was commanded by Major General Roberts at the time, later Field Marshal, affectionately known to his men as Bobs. The war occurred a few years before, between 1878 and 1880, likely towards the end of their army careers as senior NCOs. The actions Roberts commanded in the rough vicinity of the Khyber Pass were the battles of Peiwar Kotal and Charasia in 1879. I've seen various spellings and pronunciations of Charasia. For the sake of simplicity, I will just try and keep with this version for the video. The actual battle that occurred in the Khyber Pass was at Ali Masjid in 1878, and this British force was commanded by Lieutenant General Sir Samuel James Brown, not Bobs. So we have the war and 2 likely battles. Now, what regiment were they both in? One more clue is when the 2 men were trapped in the Hindu Kush mountain range by an avalanche and reminisced about their pipe major sitting on an ant's nest and getting awarded a Victoria Cross for then leading a charge when he got his backside bitten by ants and unwittingly jumped up and ran towards the enemy, inspiring a British infantry charge. This could only be a Highland regiment. Daniel, played by Sean Connery, a Scotsman, would also confirm this choice. Therefore, by a process of elimination, it's got to be the 72nd Highlanders, on campaign with Major General Roberts during the Second Anglo-Afghan War. Elite troops, the Highlanders arrived in India in 1871 and were hardened to the climate. Peachy, an old India hand who spoke the local languages, might have transferred into the regiment when his regiment finished its tour of duty at the time, which was common practice for men who wished to stay on in India. Then both serving in the regiment, Peachy and Daniel met and their bromance hit it off. Highlanders fought with exceptional discipline, valour and fortitude and had a reputation during the Victorian era as shock troops, or troops specialised in leading and carrying out quick attacks. The 72nd would be merged with the 78th Foot in 1881 and named the Seaforth Highlanders. We won't get bogged down into too many details about the causes and progress of the war here. Suffice to say, the conflict can be divided into 2 main parts. The first British invasion, which was limited, culminated in the Treaty of Gandamak, which allowed a British mission to reside in Kabul. The main battles here were at Ali Masjid and Peiwar Kotal. A few months later, the British mission in Kabul was massacred, leading to a second full invasion of Afghanistan by the British, and this time the force was led by Major General, later Field Marshal, Lord Roberts, who marched on Kabul. I'm going to pick a less well-known battle from this campaign that included the 72nd Highlanders and Peachy and Daniel. The Battle of Charasia. The location of the battle was just outside Kabul, and victory there would allow the British to seize the Afghan capital city. As an aside before we jump into the battle, here's a few anecdotes about the British commander, otherwise known as Bobs. Becoming one of the most famous British generals of the era, Roberts was genuinely loved, respected and trusted as a commander by all troops, British and Indian. In his memoirs, 41 Years in India, you get so many insights into his character. Entering a hostile land as the leader of an invading army, you're going to be a high-profile target for assassination. In a region known for fanatical opponents and expert camp infiltrators, Roberts picked a team of 6 bodyguards as his close protection squad. This team were known as orderlies. These 6 men would have to be as brave as lions and as watchful as hawks to outwit the many threats to their chief's life. Who did he pick? I know what most of you are thinking, especially the British veterans. However, the Air Force wasn't around then, so it wasn't the RAF Reg.
The Big Three.
Within the force, there were elite British regiments such as the Highlanders and Rifles, but Roberts selected 2 Gurkhas, 2 Sikh troops and 2 Pathans. It just shows you the level and trust and respect that he had in his Indian as well as British troops. 2 of these bodyguards would later follow him on campaign in Burma. Roberts states in his memoirs, "I had 6 orderlies attached to me, 2 Sikhs, 2 Gurkhas and 2 Pathans. The Sikhs and Gurkhas never left me for a day during the 2 years I was in Afghanistan. The Pathans behaved equally as well, but they fell sick and had to be changed more than once. Whenever I emerged from my tent, 2 or more of the orderlies appeared and kept close by me. They always had good information as to what was going on, and I could generally tell whether there was likely to be trouble or not by the number in attendance. They put themselves on duty and decided how many were required." Me commenting now, just imagine how much trust he must have had in those men, letting them cut their own routine and trusting them to make those specific decisions on his personal protection. Years later, he would still catch up with his orderlies and have time for old Indian soldiers who would also visit him. I can't see the likes of Snobby Wolseley doing this with his enlisted men. Although they were excellent bodyguards, I still wonder if old Cockney pickpocket Peachy managed to fish a pocket watch or 2 out of Bob's pockets. In his memoirs as well, Roberts states that his life was also saved by an Indian cavalryman, Mazur Ali, from the 1st Bengal Cavalry during the war, who stopped an Afghan villager cutting him up. Ali was awarded an Indian Order of Merit, the equivalent of a Victoria Cross, and became an officer. This reminds me of Richard Sharp saving the Duke of Wellington's life. I will do a video at some point about Roberts and his career and his medals, but that's just an insight into this fascinating character. So let's take a closer look at the Battle of Charasia in October 1879. I love looking at primary sources where you can get the most informative and potentially the most unbiased information, or at least understand their perspectives at the time, rather than second-hand accounts. I have a copy of the original dispatches or war diary from Lord Roberts describing the battle personally in addition to his own memoirs. During the battle, Roberts initially feinted to the left of the Afghan line, drawing their attention and forces in that direction. This diversionary tactic allowed him to launch the main attack on the right, catching the Afghans off guard. The British utilised their artillery effectively, including 2 Gatling guns, which were used for the first time in action during the war. Off the top of my head, I believe Gatlings were used at Ulundi during the Zulu War a few months earlier, but correct me if I'm wrong. Roberts states, Brigadier General Baker now moved his force forward. 1 company of the 72nd Highlanders under Captain Brooke Hunt extended to crown the heights on the left and speedily became engaged. The main body of the regiment attacked the enemy in front, their advance being well covered by 2 guns of the mountain battery. Owing, however, to the obstinate resistance of the enemy and the extremely difficult nature of the ground on the left flank, the advance was somewhat checked. The company of the 72nd was therefore reinforced by 2 companies of the 5th Gurkhas, whilst 2 more companies of that regiment, commanded by Major Fitzhugh, and 200 men of the 5th Punjab Infantry under Captain Hall were pushed forward to strengthen the direct attack. As it had now become evident to the enemy that the real attack was being directed against their right, and their troops were seen to be moving in hot haste in that latter direction, it became imperative to carry their position before it could be further reinforced. During the attack, a regimental piper was fatally wounded by a gunshot wound to the thigh. Another drummer was also seriously injured. These soldiers would be the modern-day equivalent of, say, a radio man, beating out communications to the troops to make tactical changes, and therefore being specifically targeted by enemy forces. At 2 p.m, after 2 hours of fighting, the ridge on the left of this position was seized, and the retreating enemy exposed to a crossfire, which inflicted very heavy loss. The general advance was now sounded, and the first position gallantly carried by the 72nd Highlanders, 5th Gurkhas, and the 5th Punjab Infantry. The enemy fought well to the last, and charged close up to the 5th Gurkhas, who repulsed them with heavy loss. The 72nd Highlanders bore the brunt of the early part of the engagement on this flank, as will be seen from their casualties. They were admirably led by their company officers under the skillful direction of Lieutenant Colonel Clark. The opposing force had now retreated to a position some 600 yards in the rear from what they had been driven, and against this our troops advanced in rushes, covered by the fire of the mountain battery. After defending this place for half an hour, the enemy again fell back. The attack made by a company of the 23rd Pioneers, supported by the 72nd, 5th Gurkhas and 2 companies of the 92nd, proving irresistible. By late afternoon, the high ridge was gained, and the enemy's line of defence exposed to being taken in reverse. This soon caused them to retreat from their positions. A general advance was now made, but no further resistance was offered. The British carried the day. Roberts estimates 300 Afghan dead and hundreds more wounded. The British lost 18 dead and 70 wounded. Once the battle was finished, Roberts was able to march into Kabul. The war would continue, with other battles occurring at Kabul and the British defeat at Maiwand, culminating in Roberts' last victory at Kandahar. This is where we'll go on to our first medal, the Kabul to Kandahar Star. This medal was struck to celebrate the 10,000 troops, all selected by Roberts, who participated in the famous Kabul to Kandahar march to relieve the beleaguered forces of General Burrows and defeat the Afghan army of Ayub Khan, the pretender to the emirship of Kabul. The 300-mile march was completed in 23 days in daily temperatures of over 100 Fahrenheit. This made Roberts one of the Victorian era's greatest military heroes, restoring prestige for the British in the region. Taking 30 days of rations, an extra tin of pea soup was issued to every second British soldier, extra rum to those who drank spirits, and extra meat to those not taking rum. A shortage of water was a constant problem. Just imagine carrying all your kit, the heat, the dust, the constant thirst, and the threat of being sniped at and harassed daily. Roberts, an inspirational leader, was always there to motivate the troops. He writes, "As soon as I am satisfied with the ground for our encampment, I then eat 2 or 3 hard-boiled eggs, or a bit of cold chicken I carry with me, and drink some cold tea. This quite refreshes me, and if there is any shade obtainable, I take a short snooze until the troops arrive. I always go out and see them march in. The men like it. It shows them all that I take an interest in them, and that I don't take shelter or get rest before them." Roberts obviously didn't go to the leadership school of Sir Henry Simmerson from the Sharp series. The medal itself. The medal was made of bronze from captured guns, similar to the Victoria Cross. The obverse is a 5-pointed star surmounted by a crown with a ring for suspension. The centre is inscribed Kabul to Kandahar with 1880 at the foot, and the VRI monogram, the Queen Empress, in the centre. The ribbon is watered silk of pink, white, yellow, white and blue to represent an eastern sunrise. There are no clasps. On the reverse, some medals have the recipient's name impressed or engraved, others were left plain. This medal would always be issued with medal number 2, the Afghanistan Medal. This is a silver medal given to British and Indian Army troops involved in the war. The obverse is a veiled profile of Queen Victoria, and the reverse is an elephant carrying a cannon depicting an army in India on the march. The ribbon is dark green with crimson edges. There are 6 clasps awarded for this medal. The clasps were the main battles of the conflict. Maiwand, a British defeat, was not counted as a clasp. The 72nd Highlanders, being in the thick of many battles, would have been awarded 4 clasps, as seen here. During their time in Kafiristan, Daniel and Peachy met Billyfish, who was stranded in country. He was a Gurkha and a survivor from a previous military surveying expedition which was struck by an avalanche. Billyfish helped them with translation and served as an interpreter, but also was an important character in his own right. For the next medal, I'm going to speculate that Peachy could have been involved in this campaign before he joined the Highlanders, and that Billyfish was also in this as a Gurkha. This was the Perak Campaign, belonging to Medal No. 3, the India General Service Medal of 1854. For this, I'm reading an extract from Clasps of Courage. Perak is now a state of modern-day Malaysia and is located on the west coast of the Malay Peninsula and contains tropical rainforests and an equatorial climate. Perak suffered constantly not only from piracy but also internal ethnic strife between the Malay and Chinese communities, as well as rivalry among Malay chiefs. Having long experience in Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, the British resident or advisor, James Birch, spoke no Malay and had no sympathy for local customs or traditions. Birch was seen by local leaders as meddling in internal affairs and a threat to the traditional order, and in 1875 he was assassinated. In response, the British sent an expeditionary force of around 1,500 men to restore order and punish local chiefs, including Sultan Abdullah, a figurehead who had helped organise the assassination. The first Gurkhas, who I'm going to fictitiously attach Billyfish to, distinguished themselves during the campaign, showing their fighting prowess at Katalama by driving off a Malay assault in hand-to-hand combat. Overall in the campaign, the Gurkhas reportedly lost 7 men in battle and 1 officer and 4 riflemen to disease. This was the first campaign outside of the Indian subcontinent undertaken by the Gurkhas, and with it they began to establish their reputation as a force to be reckoned with there. After victory, the British gained control of Perak and it became officially part of the British Empire. Sultan Abdullah was deposed and sent into exile to the Seychelles, and the rebel chiefs were severely punished, with some being hanged. The Royal Navy was heavily involved during the campaign, providing gun and rocket support to the troops. 1 Victoria Cross was awarded for the campaign. 4 British regiments, the 3rd, 10th, 19th and 80th Foot, were involved in this campaign. Any one of them could have been Peachy's old regiment before he joined the Highlanders. The medal itself, made of silver, over 20 campaign clasps were issued, with a medal ranging from 1854 to 95. The obverse is a profile of Queen Victoria and the reverse Victory crowning a semi-nude warrior. The ribbon are 3 crimson and 2 dark blue stripes. If you wish to know more, the book Clasps of Courage has around 140 pages packed with information about this fantastic medal. Finally, knowing their propensity for blackmailing officials, I wonder if Danny and Peachy were able to ensure that they were awarded a Long Service and Good Conduct Medal for their 21 years' service. Maybe their commanding officer was persuaded to issue them a medal to cover up some scandal with the regimental mess funds. Just a thought. The Army Long Service and Good Conduct Medal was struck in 1830 and is made of silver. The obverse until 1901 was a trophy of arms, after which it became the reigning monarch. The reverse says for long service and good conduct. The 19th century older-fashioned ribbon is crimson. It was issued during the Victorian period after 1854 for 18 years good conduct and service. Before, it was 21 years in the infantry and 24 years in the cavalry. Serving periods in India was hard on the health of any soldier during the era. What I love about the medals from this time frame is that many of them come with the research papers of the soldiers themselves who served. From this, you can get a fascinating insight into the life of a Victorian soldier. As an example, we have a Private Jones of the Devonshire Regiment who attested in Exeter on the 22nd of July 1881, around the same period as Peachy and Danny were in action. Previously a labourer and aged 19 years, he deployed to join his regiment in India in October 1882, spending 10 years and 3 months in country. The Devonshires were posted to India in 1877. During that time, Jones fought with the mounted infantry in Burma, attempting to intercept insurgents. He was promoted to corporal in 1890. Jones's medical record would echo many of the Victorian soldiers of this period. Initially going to depot in Dublin prior to leaving for India, Jones catches a rather nasty social disease which leaves him in hospital for 17 days. This is a family channel, so I'm not going to mention the disease. Suffice to say, it begins with G and rhymes with Chris Rea. Over the next few years in India, in between getting more bouts of Charasia, Jones gets various bronchial illnesses, malaria, and a serious burn which puts him in hospital for 17 days. The handwriting is difficult to make out on his report, but it seems like he accidentally spilt boiling water from a coffee dispenser on himself. In Shwebo, Burma, another dose of that social disease puts him in hospital for 17 days. 2 months later, he's back in sickbay, being treated for yet another dose, and also a sprained ankle. I don't know if they were connected in any way. In January 1893, he's on the sick chitlet again for an adhesion or scarring injury, maybe caused by all that time in the saddle with the mounted infantry. That's just an insight into one British soldier at the time, albeit most medical records I see don't have quite that level of VD-related admissions. Rather than driving home for Christmas, it looks like Private Jones spent most of his holiday leave in the clinic by the looks of it, and if he continued at the rate he was going at, he might just be on the road to hell. 2 fantastic songs, by the way, sung by our legendary Northeast rock and blues singer, with a voice like gravelly velvet. Finally, I just wanted to point out the variety of Freemasonic medals I stumbled on during looking up the meaning behind Danny's necklace. I don't know too much about this, but you do see many of them floating around at medal fairs. From what I've read, as I've never been in the lodge, Danny's necklace has the square and compass. The square represents morality and honesty, symbolises the importance of living an upright life and treating others with fairness and integrity. The compass symbolises self-restraint and balance. They remind Masons to control their desires and maintain moderation in all things. Hopefully I'm on the level with this information. However, I have heard lots of different explanations for the symbology, ranging from the very mundane to the wild conspiratorial. So if there are any Masons watching, feel free to correct me in the comments or elaborate further. Therefore, in summary, we have a Kabul to Kandahar star for both Daniel and Peachy, again for both characters an Afghanistan medal, for Peachy an India General Service 1854 or IGS 54 with Perak clasp, Billy Fish could also qualify, a Long Service and Good Conduct medal for both Daniel and Peachy, and finally a Masonic necklace for Daniel. I used an example here with the all-seeing eye, just to spice it up a bit. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some value from this, and I'll see you in the next one.